If you cure me, I'll give you 1 million, mocked Billionaire. Prepare the check, Boy replied. The autumn mist clung to the sprawling gardens of the Whitmore estate like a shroud of forgotten dreams. Victor Whitmore, once the titan of Wall Street, now sat imprisoned in his wheelchair on the marble terrace, his empire crumbling around him like the golden leaves that carpeted his grounds. "Another one, sir," his assistant Margaret announced wearily, gesturing toward the ornate gates where a small figure stood silhouetted against the dying light. Victor's laugh was bitter as November wind. For 3 years, ever since the accident that had stolen his legs and seemingly his luck, they had come. Faith healers, miracle workers, charlatans with silver tongues and empty promises. Each one had left with less than they'd arrived with their dignity, their confidence, sometimes their will to continue their charade. "Let him through," Victor commanded, his voice carrying the same authority that had once moved mountains of money. "I could use some entertainment." The boy who approached couldn't have been more than 14. Unlike the others who had come in flowing robes or expensive suits, this child wore a simple school uniform, his backpack slung casually over one shoulder. Most striking were his eyes, not the fevered gleam of a zealot, but the steady, quiet confidence of someone who had seen impossible things become possible. "Mr. Whitmore," the boy said, extending a hand that Victor ignored. "I'm David Chen. I believe I can help you." Victor's cruel smile spread slowly across his weathered face. "Help me? Boy, do you have any idea how much I've spent trying to walk again? Millions. The best doctors from Johns Hopkins to Switzerland, experimental treatments that exist only in laboratories, and you, a child with a backpack, think you can succeed where they've all failed?" David's expression never wavered. Sometimes the most powerful solutions come from the most unexpected places. "Powerful solutions?" Victor wheeled closer, his eyes glittering with malicious amusement. "Tell you what, kid. If you can cure me, if you can make me walk again, I'll give you $1 million. Cash. But when you fail like all the rest, you leave and never come back. Deal?" The boy met his gaze without flinching. "Prepare the check, Mr. Whitmore." The confidence in those 4 words sent an unexpected chill through Victor's chest. In 3 years, no one had responded to his challenge with such certainty. Not the renowned neurologist from Germany, not the faith healer from Brazil, not even the experimental surgeon from Tokyo, who had literally written the book on spinal reconstruction. "Fascinating," Victor murmured, studying the boy more carefully. "And how exactly do you propose to accomplish this miracle?" "First, I need to understand what really happened to you," David said, pulling a worn notebook from his backpack. "The accident 3 years ago, tell me about it." Victor's face darkened. "That's not your concern. You're here to perform a miracle, remember? Wave your hands, say your prayers, collect your failure." But David had already begun walking around the wheelchair, his eyes scanning not Victor's legs, but something else entirely. "The doctor said your spinal cord was severely damaged in the car accident, but that's not the whole truth, is it?" "What are you implying?" Victor's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You can move your legs, Mr. Whitmore. You've been able to for over a year now." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the autumn wind seemed to hold its breath. "That's impossible," Victor said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. David opened his notebook and began reading. "June 15th, 2 years ago. You were seen by a security camera walking 3 steps in your private study at 2 a.m. October 3rd last year. Your physical therapist noted significant improvement in muscle response, but the session stopped abruptly the next week. March 18th this year. Your housekeeper mentioned to her sister, who happens to be my neighbor, that she saw you standing at your bedroom window for several minutes." Victor's hands gripped the wheelchair's armrests until his knuckles turned white. "You're fishing, guessing, even if any of that were true." "It's not about your legs, is it?" David interrupted gently. "It's about everything else. The lawsuits, the investigations, the business deals that fell through when your partners thought you were vulnerable. Being in that chair became your shield. For the first time in years, Victor Whitmore felt truly seen, not as the ruthless businessman, not as the tragic accident victim, but as the frightened man who had discovered that sometimes our prisons are of our own making. "You don't know what you're talking about," he whispered, but the fight had gone out of his voice. David sat down on the marble steps, suddenly looking very much like the 14-year-old he was. "My grandmother couldn't walk for 2 years after my grandfather died. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with her legs, but she couldn't find anything right with her life." "That's different. That's psychology? Grief? Fear?" David shrugged. "Maybe, but she was still trapped just like you are. The chair wasn't keeping her legs from working, it was keeping her heart from breaking all over again every time she tried to move forward." Victor stared at this impossible child who had somehow looked past 3 years of carefully constructed lies and seen the truth that even Victor had hidden from himself. The accident had healed, his legs had recovered, but his world, his purpose, his identity, his reason for existing had shattered so completely that standing up felt like stepping into an abyss. "Even if what you're suggesting were true," Victor said slowly, "what makes you think you can fix it?" "Because," David said, standing and extending his hand again, "I'm not going to fix anything. You are." "You want to know the real miracle?" David continued, his young voice carrying wisdom that seemed borrowed from someone much older. "It's not that I can make you walk. It's that you can choose to walk right now, this very moment. But first, you have to decide what you'll be walking toward." Victor looked at the offered hand as if it were a lifeline thrown across an ocean of his own making. "You don't understand. If I get up from this chair, everything changes. The lawsuits resume. The investigations continue. My enemies will know I'm no longer protected by sympathy. And I could lose everything." David nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother said the same thing. She was terrified that if she started walking again, she'd have to start living again. And living hurt. So what happened to her? She realized that the chair wasn't protecting her from pain, it was protecting her from joy, from purpose, from the chance to matter again." David's eyes met Victor's. "She's 93 now and teaches Tai Chi in the park every morning." Victor felt something stirring in his chest, something he hadn't felt in 3 long years. Not hope exactly, but the memory of what hope had once felt like. "You said I would have to choose what to walk toward," he said quietly. "I'm not sure I know anymore." David smiled for the first time since arriving. "Then let's figure it out together." The sun was setting behind the estate's ancient oak trees when Victor Whitmore finally placed his hands on the armrests of his wheelchair and began to push himself up. His legs that had been strong enough to carry him for over a year, but had been kept imprisoned by his own fear, trembled not from weakness but from the magnitude of the moment. "Where am I walking to?" he asked, halfway between sitting and standing, suspended between his old life and whatever came next. "That's up to you," David replied. "But maybe start with why you wanted to make all that money in the first place, before the deals and the power and the fear of losing it all." Victor paused, his mind racing back through decades of ambition and acquisition. Then, like a photograph developing in his memory, he saw it. A small boy in a hospital bed, his younger brother Tommy, dying of a disease that money could have cured if their family had possessed any. The vow he had made at 11 years old to never let poverty steal another life he cared about. "I wanted to build hospitals," he whispered, the memory flooding back with startling clarity. "Free clinics. I wanted to make sure no family would have to choose between medicine and meals." And then the money became the goal instead of the tool. Victor's voice grew stronger as understanding dawned. "I forgot why I was climbing the mountain." With a deep breath that seemed to draw in 3 years' worth of suppressed hope, Victor Whitmore stood up. His legs held him steady. The ground felt solid beneath his feet. But more importantly, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt solid too. David grinned and pulled out his phone. I'm calling the Whitmore Foundation's legal team. They'll want to know that their CEO is ready to get back to work. The foundation? Victor took a tentative step, then another. But I dissolved that years ago when the lawsuit started. I couldn't risk. You didn't dissolve it. You just stopped funding it. David's eyes twinkled with mischief. My mom is actually one of the lawyers who's been keeping it alive on a shoestring budget, hoping you'd remember what it was for. Victor stared at the boy in amazement. Your mother? You didn't come here to heal me. You came here to save the foundation. I came here because my little sister needed surgery that we couldn't afford, and the Whitmore Foundation used to help families like ours. But mostly, David's expression grew serious. I came because my mom said you were a good man who had forgotten how to be good to yourself. The laughter that escaped Victor's throat was unlike any sound he had made in 3 years. Not bitter, not mocking, but genuinely, surprisingly joyful. You know what the funniest part is? Victor said, taking several confident steps toward the house. I actually wrote that check before you got here. $1 million. I've been carrying it around for months, hoping someone would actually prove me wrong. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded check. But you didn't cure my paralysis, did you? You cured something much more important. David looked at the check, then back at Victor. I can't take this. You're right. You can't. Victor tore the check in half, then in half again, because you're going to earn much more than that. 6 months later, David Chen stood in the gleaming lobby of Whitmore General Hospital, the first of 12 medical facilities that the revived Whitmore Foundation planned to build across the country. His little sister Maria played nearby, her surgery successful, her laughter echoing off the marble walls. Victor approached, walking with the confident stride of a man who had remembered his purpose. The board meeting went well. We're approved for the pediatric wing expansion. And the free clinic program? Launches next month. We'll be able to help over 1,000 families in the first year alone. Victor paused, watching Maria chase soap bubbles that a volunteer was blowing near the children's area. You know, I spent 3 years thinking I needed someone to cure my legs. I never realized I needed someone to cure my memory. David looked up at the man who had become both a mentor and a friend. So, what's next? Well, the foundation is offering full scholarships to promising young people who want to study medicine or healthcare administration. I believe we have our first candidate. David's eyes widened. Mr. Whitmore, I can't... David, you performed the most important miracle of all. You reminded a bitter old man that the best way to heal yourself is to heal others. Victor placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Besides, who's going to help me make sure I don't forget again? As the sun set through the hospital's windows, casting long golden shadows across the lobby, Victor Whitmore realized that sometimes the most profound journeys begin not with a single step, but with a single moment of choosing to remember who you really are. The boy who had asked him to prepare a check had given him something far more valuable than $1 million. He had given him back his life. And in the months and years that followed, as the Whitmore Foundation grew and flourished, as thousands of families received care they never could have afforded, as David Chen graduated medical school with honors and returned to work alongside his mentor, people would often ask about the miracle that had transformed the bitter billionaire. Victor would always smile and give the same answer. The miracle wasn't that I learned to walk again. The miracle was that I learned to walk forward. This story reminds us that sometimes the greatest healings happen not in our bodies but in our hearts, and that the most powerful miracles are the ones we choose to create for others. Don't forget to subscribe for more interesting stories like this every day.